So last weekend we had the fight with Crawford versus Madrimov, which was an interesting fight because a lot of people were expecting it to be an easy wash, myself included. I thought it was going to be a one-sided fight. I thought this was kind of the thing that I personally thought was going to happen. I thought that the openings for this fight were going to be similar, very much like how Crawford dealt with Spence. There are a few ways to look at this, so let's get into it. The first thing that I wanted to say is that I think there are two things happening here that, some people might not be pointing out. On the one side, Crawford is entering the 154 pound division against a very good opponent with a very deep amateur record. And I've always said 1 or 2 years in my own circle, basically, because I've not been doing YouTube for long enough to point it out, but I've been studying the Uzbeks for the past 2 years, and especially their amateurs, and their national team has been doing really well in the last 8 years or something, since 2016, the Brazilian Olympic Games. Prior to that, they weren't really on the level, so to speak, on a world level, and they've been taking titles, world championships, World Series, the Asian Series. Last time they were dominating. Of course, they were home favorite. They were home favorite because they were organizing the Asian championships in their own country in 2023. So the Kazakhstan was doing really well there. I think I don't know his name. The Japanese amateur fighter that is, I think, now on his road to actually a gold medal in the Olympics. But I've not been keeping close track because, of how the Olympics are currently presented. I don't really feel like paying to watch the Olympic Games. For me, that's always been something that you can follow through live streams, and I kind of think that they're trying to bank on the streaming services like HBO, wanting you to buy the live stream, so to speak. So it's all a bit more merchandised, I would say. A bit more capital needs to flow in, and money needs to be made, and they're definitely banking on the streaming services, and I kind of don't like it. So I've not been very actively following the Olympics as much as I actually would have liked to, for this very reason, because it used to be, I remember 2016 and 2021 as well, that you would just be going to a live stream, watch your favorite sport, whether that be athletics, boxing, basketball, beach volleyball, tennis, you name it, fencing, karate, or karate, fencing, judo, whatever sport you fancy. You could just take the live stream, follow the sport without commentary, which I absolutely big favor of. And with boxing, it's just been different overall. It's just been more commercial, so to speak. I am not very happy about it. So, I've been saying for the past 2 years that the Uzbekistani, they're coming. They are turning over to the pros. They're doing very well. They have deep amateur careers. And again, we've been led to believe that this was going to be an easy fight, considering the pro record, while Madrimov had an absolute stellar amateur record. So there was a surprise looming in the air, and the fight to be more difficult. Although I personally didn't think Crawford would have the amount of problems with Madrimov as he eventually did. So, but there are more ways to look at this. So, one of the things that I thought I wouldn't see is how good Madrimov was in this fight particularly. Like, you're only judging fights based on the last performance, and Crawford's performance, although being a year ago against Spence, was an amazing performance, like stellar. Nobody expected it to be such a wash. I expected it to be pretty one-sided, but I didn't expect it to be the extent of one-sided that we actually saw with the beating that he put on Spence, on Errol Spence Jr. So I expected a 11th round stoppage, and I expected it to be competitive until the midway point, until Crawford figured him out and took over. But that only took one round, basically, of figuring out. And in the second, it was just like Crawford just... A credit to Spence for hanging in there as long as he did. I think the fight should have been stopped way sooner, but because Spence took a horrible beating, I think we are not going to see him again. And that also draws the comparison that I've been looking for in this fight against Madrimov, because the openings that Spence would present in his in the fight, so the 2-1 and the counter right hook, I expected this to be the key punches as well. Here's why. Madrimov has a tendency of not just only leaping in, but leaping in kind of the similar way as Spence did. Not entirely the same. He would be more on the outside of, or being more on the outside to mid-range. But he does come in a similar way as Spence, and I expected Crawford to win a jabbing contest, which, I mean, he did, but it wasn't as clear. Madrimov was very, very intelligent in his approach. So what I expected to happen was Madrimov would get in, would have to go past the reach of Crawford, and Crawford would stay the outside, and Madrimov would try to pressure Crawford. And then Crawford would find jab with him, and then find the opening for the 2-1, which he scored the knockdown with against Spence. And I expected that to be exactly the same case here. And because Madrimov had some horrible defensive flaws similar to Spence, basically getting into range and then trying to land his shots, and then when he couldn't really get it off, he would kind of like duck down, not really have a proper guard, not really have good head movement. It'll being like in the third stage of attack, so where you've thrown your shots, and then, you know, taking good positioning, having a defensive awareness. Basically, he would just kind of like duck down his head and kind of crouch a bit over, and I expected Crawford to punish him here, punish him hard. He did punish him at times in this manner, but credit to Madrimov, who didn't really give that many openings. He didn't really had this tendency in this fight that much, so he definitely did his homework. And this was something that I found really interesting to see. Madrimov was very good. This was a very good performance. I think it by far his best. Also, all the feints, the style of Madrimov he's a fighter that seems to be able to adapt better to the fights to the fighters that he's facing, and he had a incredibly good game plan in place. Lots of feints, like textbook boxing overall. Lots of feints if you're the shorter guy, if you have to move your way in, move your head, feint, be unpredictable. Sometimes going in with a lead right, then going in with a jab, feinting to the body, jab to the body, expected a jab to the body to come, which is the exact same punch that Spence would throw, but he was throwing it in this fight, setting it up way better than he would normally do. Normally you would just jab to the body and be kind of open in a mid-range position to be countered off, which is Crawford's bread and butter, which is also how he got to Spence and knocked him down in the first fight in the second round. So yeah, that didn't happen. What did happen where and there are, I think, two things happening. Crawford didn't look as good as he normally did. Some of it had to do with Madrimov. A lot of it had to do with Madrimov being a lot better. I thought that this was also why Crawford picked Madrimov as a way to enter into the 154-pound division, because his last performance, he would just have to redo what he did before. The same openings seem to be Madrimov seemed to be vulnerable to exactly the same things that Spence was vulnerable of in his fight. It turns out that when he came out in this fight, Madrimov wasn't vulnerable to the same things, not in the slightest. He was smart about it. He was fighting at his own pace. He was dictating. A lot of time he was able to dictate how the fight was progressing, how he was entering, using lots of feints, using lots of head movement, not staying too long in mid-range after he was able to close the distance. He was constantly in and out. It's the way how you should approach a fight, and he was executing it really well. So that is one thing. Madrimov turned out to be a much better opponent, much more seasoned, much more aware of the danger Crawford presented, and not giving him the openings that Spence or that he would normally give in his previous performances, where the opponents weren't on the level and he could get away with it. And he was smart enough to realize that he is not gonna get away with it with Crawford this time. So that is one thing. That's why one of the reasons why this fight was not as close, or not as competitive. Why this fight was competitive. Why this fight wasn't one-sided. That's the reason. One of the reasons. But there is another one. The other reason was Crawford himself wasn't as good in this fight. I know that is going to spark a lot of hate. People might not agree with it, but going off of the win against Spence, which was such a dominant display, and I really feel like the inactivity showed here. When you are entering the back end of your career, I think you need to be more busy. Crawford just took more than a year to get this fight. Like last time was in July and this is August. So we're 13 months, almost 30 months since his last fight. And it's not good. I don't think it's good. You can be as good as Crawford and still get the win, but at what cost? I think he should have fought at least one time in between. He should have taken even a small warm-up fight, and it might have been criticized. But if this version of Crawford is going to fight Boots Ennis, I would actually favor Boots Ennis to win. Because Boots Ennis is active. He is fighting at least two times a year. Sometimes even three times. So when he is going to fight, if the fight is going to get made, and I do think that Boots doesn't have a lot left to do in the 147-pound division, because there isn't that many people left. David Evanesian was maybe the most elite fighter that he could pick right now, and he could potentially fight a guy like Devin Haney or Regis Prograis, Boots Ennis, but I personally wouldn't even want to see that. I think Boots is gonna follow up Crawford, and considering his frame and his size, I do expect Boots to enter the 154-pound division, the super welterweight division, and basically go in there to challenge Crawford while he still can. Like that's I think that fight's intrigue is just gonna increase, and Crawford should stay busy. He should fight guys like Tim Tszyu, Fundora. What's the other guy's name that beat Fundora last time around? I forgot his name. Ortiz, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm confusing another fighter, but basically the fighter that the boxer that beat Fundora and knocked him out with the left hook. So yeah, I personally think that this is something that, and also the Charlo is entering again, but I'm honestly, I, I I'm done with the Charlos, to be honest. They're just boring. They're like, I mean, they're fighters, but like how Jamal Charlo went into the like when he was at the peak before he was when he was fighting Castano, fighting Tony Harrison in a double fight. That Charlo is not there anymore. Right now he is good. He made his bank. He filled up his bank account, and he is just looking to cash in and kind of live off the success that he previously had. So I think I am not so interested in, like, especially like moving up to fight Canelo. I've just no, I'm not. It's just it's just money grabbing at this point. It's just not. There's just nothing that resembles the fighter. Avoiding Tim Tszyu for dear life. Tim Tszyu trying to fight Charlo for, like, I don't know how long he has been trying to get that fight, and Tim Tszyu is not even interested anymore in Charlo because he doesn't have the belts to his name anymore. So why would Tim Tszyu want to fight him, and why and for that reason why would Crawford fight him? It doesn't make any sense. I would rather see, and even though Crawford might, because he was calling out Spence or calling out during the Spence fight. He was calling out Charlo then, but yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in this fight. To be honest, the only fight I'm interested in this point is to see to see Crawford fight Boots Ennis. But I do not favor Crawford, surprisingly, right now. I think he should see this performance that he had, even though it was a good performance, but it was definitely, and I would rephrase G-Man boxing here, but he was, it was a good performance, but lackluster. I think he said it there. I think that is exactly what we saw. Madrimov is fighting a great fight. He really showed that he could, that he is way levels higher than people thought he would be, and that has to do with facing the right opposition. So he had a great performance, but Crawford, he looked, and I think this is what we saw here. This is the other part. Madrimov was better than anticipated, a lot better. Didn't present the same openings that he would have a few fights prior. If you observed him earlier on, it seemed to be Crawford's bread and butter for this fight, but he didn't fight that way. He fought a very different fight, very different style. It was a very different way that Madrimov was fighting, and the game plan from Crawford was probably based on the fights that Madrimov had before. And then he showed up doing something completely different. So it took longer for Crawford to figure him out, way longer. And to make the adjustment and to be able and to find moments to kind of tee off on and find moments to get back the shots that he was taking at Madrimov and turning on the dog in him, so to speak. But he was not, Crawford was not that sharp in this fight. He was good, but he was not spectacular. It's not a crowd. And I personally think that even though people might be talking about age, I think the age factor here is not at play yet. I think it's gonna be. But I think it has more to do with the fact that Crawford has just been way too inactive over the past year. Should have had at least one fight to kind of keep a rhythm, to keep camps going, and to just be on almost like a 3-season long break to then go into a fight camp a few months prior to fight, Madrimov, I think was a bad decision on Crawford's part. Would like to see him this year one more time, if not early in 2025, but I think he needs to, because Crawford is currently at an age where he cannot take the time off anymore that he did here. He should stay more busy. And if he stays more busy, he can, I would favor him against Boots Ennis, but if it's going to take another year and Boots Ennis is going to stay active, I'm not so sure. Boots Ennis is not as flawless as Crawford, because Crawford is technically on so many levels so much better than Boots Ennis. He is defensive. He knows how to fight on his outside. He's very physical as well. Very physical fighter, very strong fighter. But Boots Ennis is as well. Boots Ennis has a lot of defensive flaws. He gets hit relatively easy, where Crawford is more harder to find your punches on. And in this fight, he was fighting with his high guard on, long guard actually, long high guard, active long high guard. So it was pretty good to see that Crawford doesn't always fight in the Philly shell, so he is able to be defensively responsible in those areas, whereas Boots Ennis doesn't seem to be. So, yet again, I do think that if right now you would put Boots Ennis and Crawford in together in the 2 months, I think Boots Ennis takes it. I think this is something that Crawford really needs to work on, is to make sure that he doesn't lose. Because if you're getting old, that muscle memory, even though it's there, it fades as well, because everything fades with age. Everything fades with age, and it goes fast. And it's going to go even faster. And if he doesn't stay active, he doesn't stay in the game, so to speak, we're going to look at a lot of more close fights, especially in the 154-pound division. Like, I think he needs to go back in as soon as possible. That's what I think. I think that is why Crawford still has time. He hasn't taken... I mean, he's been rocked, he's been hit, but he has always been a pretty defensively good fighter. And I would like to see him fight Boots Ennis. I think it would be interesting to see Crawford fight a Fundora, to be honest. Or Tim Tszyu. I would be less interested in Tim Tszyu. I think the style matchup from Tim Tszyu versus Crawford is just... It favors Crawford. Like, styles make fights. I do think that if you put Tim Tszyu with Crawford beats him easy. Like, just puts a beating him in, like with Spence. I think the hand speed, the precision of Crawford just trumps the pressure that Tim Tszyu puts on. And Tim Tszyu is open. Like, his whole fighting style is based on reaction, and the reaction time of Crawford is just so much better. He's so much sharper. His punches have so much more in them than Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu is a clubbing pressure fighter that pressures people to the inside and takes advantage when he sees the reaction, parries, pulls back, and then he comes in, because he's quite explosive. But and I think that favors Crawford. Like, he would just be on, like, he would just be picking Tim Tszyu off easy. Like, that's no problem for him. But Fundora is a different story. I think Fundora is actually a pretty interesting style matchup, because I think that Fundora presents a type of style that Crawford is going to have a lot of difficulty with. And I do think, in a way, even though Victor Postol is a much better fighter, like technically much better than Fundora, he is also a bit awkward, like Fundora. And he gave Crawford problems with his long, limpy kind of body, moving in and out. And Fundora is very tall, very long. I do think that this is something that always favored Crawford. Being taller, having the longer reach, and then to fight somebody who doesn't have that advantage. I think that's going to cause a lot of problems for Crawford. So I would be super interested in that fight. I think he should take that fight next. Fundora versus Crawford is a great fight to look at. It will also show how it will definitely pull out and show how good Crawford is, or how good he could